Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session Ethical and Secure AI Governance in AI Driven Cybersecurity. I am Shilpa Sharma, and I will be your host for the day. Before we get started, we would like to go over a few house rules. For our attendees, the session will be in listen only mode and will last for an hour, out of which last 15 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A. Also, admissions are currently open. For further details about our courses, please visit our website www.eccu.edu. Our speaker for today's session, Kimberly Haywood. With over 25 years of experience across finance, technology, healthcare, and governance sector, Ms. Haywood has established and led management and security practices throughout her career, including her firms Knowledge Management and Associates Inc. and Nomad Cyber Concepts LLC. Her expertise in cybersecurity governance, risk, and compliance has driven successful collaborations with top organizations like USAA, Google, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. She currently serves on the board of AI Connex as a global chief governance and education advisor and is an adjunct cybersecurity professor at Colleen College in Frisco, Texas. Additionally, she contributed to the IAPPS, a global privacy and governance organization, artificial intelligence governance professional practice exam. She has published articles on AI and is currently co-authoring a white paper on an AI governance framework. Her expertise in cybersecurity and governance has earned her international recognition. This October 2024, she is scheduled to present at a prestigious global cybersecurity in Canada. Without any further delay, I would hand over the session to you, KJ.
Okay. Good morning, good evening, everyone. I'm going to start this morning with my talk about, okay, this is who I am, but this is my mindset, this is my thought. As a thought leader, I believe that my commitment extends to cultivating next generation of cybersecurity professionals. I'm very passionate about that. So I hope that you get a great deal of information, good tips for you, for your organizations. And if you're beginning your career in governance, risk, and compliance, I'm hoping that I'm able to provide you some insights and that you're very interested and I get you excited about GRC. So let's begin. I want to first start with the core risk. In governance, risk, and compliance, we always want to start with risk and compliance, right? So let's talk about the core risk. So the predominantly core risk that we have here is our AI systems, algorithmic biases, and that basically means is that it poses a significant danger to our economic, our society, our political views, but algorithmic biases basically are implicit and explicit. It's not necessarily algorithmic biases, for some, they see it as, well, the developers or the individuals who are building models, they have the biases. That's not always the case. There's also biases in the data. So when I speak about biases, I'm speaking about both from a human perspective as well as data, because it's both implicit and explicit. Now with your data, it's absolutely, it is or it is not, right? It's an absolute. But while biases never disappear, we do have the power to control the impact and on our outcomes, showing that the beauty of us being humans, this is what the human element aspect of it is that we control that aspect. But algorithmic bias is considered a true risk. Privacy, right? So when exploring AI systems such as like a task, it really is crucial to guarantee its precision, fairness, and commitment to upholding privacy, especially when addressing an audience that's unfamiliar with the technicalities of AI or the technicalities of a system or a tool. So I've mentioned in previous talks that privacy, and this is how I hold firm, privacy is not just about protecting data. It also involves addressing potential harms to companies, institutions, individuals, right? Reputational damage, cultural, economic, political, and all the legal and regulatory impacts of that outcome, right? If it's not protected. So that would be a risk. And then we go to the aspect of risk as it relates to third-party data, software, hardware, by itself and its use, right? The risk matrix or methodologies used by organizations developing the AI systems may not always align with the risk matrix or methodologies used by organizations deploying or operating systems. So that thus is a risk, right? And then we go to the risk that we measure in an AI life cycle. The results can differ from those that are obtained later in the process, right? Some risks aren't always visible during that life cycle, but at first you can emerge and grow the system. As it grows, you can identify what those risks are. And some organizations may have kind of varying perspectives, thought processes around developers that may see the risk in a different way. So it is crucial for us as stakeholders, as practitioners, to collaborate in the design phase of the full process of the AI lifecycle. So here's what I believe. Not only are there four, but there's a fifth element, and that's trustworthiness of AI characteristics. And that can include validity, security, resilience, accountability, and transparency, just to name a few. So I wanted to add that. I know there's four on the screen, but I believe that there's a fifth element as well that I would consider a core risk. So let's dive into regulatory AI compliance, the importance of regulatory compliance with the new EU AI Act, and they have made some adjustments and modifications since the release. And the OEC guidelines, the NIST AI RFM if you're in the US, OWASP standards, and there's also, we don't want to forget ISO, right? ISO 42001. So those regulations, as we can see, there's variations, right? The importance of AI regulations and frameworks, including the EU AI Act, the OECD, the NIST, OWASP, the 42 ISOs frameworks, they're all essential for guidelines to developing and deploying trustworthy AI systems. So if we were to take a peek off of just the NIST frameworks for here. So if you see on my screen, I have provides guidance and AI governance by managing risk, ensuring trustworthy responsibility in AI development. But also as it relates to governance, it's establishing the structure and the processes to manage those risks effectively. As far as data quality, under this particular guideline, it basically states for the NIST is that ensuring the data for AI use is accurate, relevant, and reliable. Now, this is the NIST framework that we're only speaking about. Transparency is important as well. Accountability, robust security, ensuring that AI systems are resilient and secure against the attacks of any type of failures. So that is the actual NIST framework. And then we move over to, and I'm not going to necessarily go in order. So then we move over to the EU AI Act, right? And as you can see on the screen, it basically says, it establishes a regulatory framework to ensure the safe and ethical governance of AI systems in the EU. But as from a risk classification perspective, categorizing AI systems based on risk levels, which is unacceptable, right? High, limited, and minimal risk. That's an element of the framework that also is captured for the EU AI Act. The additional component of that is, and I would say primary aspects of the principle, would be the compliance requirements. They also state that high risk AI systems must meet stringent requirements for data governance, documentation, again, transparency, and human oversight. The other aspect of the EUAI Act that I'd like to highlight is the human oversight. For the EUAI Act, that's really important as a part of their framework, right? So ensuring human intervention is definitely an integral part of the process in development and or use, right? And that's decision-making models in particular. And so if we were to talk about the ISO, which is establishing the requirements for the AI management system, ensuring ethical developments and implementation, its hyper focus is establishing requirements for that management system, right? The key areas for that for ISO is risk management, accountability, transparency, data quality, and continuous improvement. And if you hear some terminologies being repeated, I'm going to explain to you the beauty of these frameworks and how they can be utilized as a collaborative to support an organization building a governance initiative. OWASP, AI, security, privacy guidelines, and that's down here in the center here, right? It offers all best practices for ensuring AI systems. You guys can all read that, protecting privacy. But what it really also does is it also has a layer within the OWASP model, or I should say standards, is transparency and explainability, making sure that AI systems and processes are clear to users and stakeholders. Continuous monitoring, of course, right? We're talking about security. So regularly assessing AI systems for new vulnerabilities, ensuring compliance and security, ensuring the compliance of security policies, right? As well as AI policies. So the OWASP also has areas that you can see there's starting to be a parallel, right? There's a correlation between these particular frameworks. So if we go into the OEC principles, it focuses also, and I'll highlight this very briefly, it talks about inclusive growth, sustainability, and development, and well-being. A human-centric valued approach and fairness. It's principles. These are the guiding principles. And some of their guiding principles under well-being include transparency, explainability, and accountability. You're hearing the parallel. And that's the idea, right? The bottom line is that the importance of all of these acts, right, including actually, let's say the totality of all of these areas combined with GDPR type privacy guidelines, they can be incredible building blocks for developing trustworthy AI systems. It can be incredible building blocks for building a GRC initiative, a GRC practice. So if you're in this space and you're in security, or if you're developing and you're a security practitioner and you're looking for some guidelines, those particular areas is the building blocks that you're going to need to begin that process. Now, for me, this is singing the same song, right? This is potential harms of AI, which is abstracted from the NIST AI RFM. So this, as you can see, this what I pulled out as a correlation across all of the frameworks that I just recently covered: the harm to people, harm to organizations, harm to the ecosystems. And all of these areas that are highlighted here: individuals, group and community, society, harm to business operations, right? Organizations' reputations. All of those areas are covered in every aspect of all of those areas, including GDPR, except it's privacy, right? But from a standpoint of what are the potential harms, what are the risks, that's where we get into harms to people, organizations, and ecosystems. And across the board, all of them have they're singing the same song, which is good, right? Because that's the correlation between them, right? Harm to ecosystem, in the interconnected and interdependent elements of the resources, ecosystems, our food, our medical, right? What we do, our vehicles. So natural resources. So I'll keep moving on here. So that I just want to share that with you so that you can kind of get an idea of how you can see, if you see there's a correlation across. Now this is AI, and I'm only using one for the sake of time, but the AI risk management framework has a map, measure, and manage aspect to it. So from a governing perspective, the alignment of governance, both frameworks, they prioritize the accountability and transparency, and that's the governance aspect. That's the center here. That's the core. It recommends flexibility and governance, and it adapts to unique organizations' needs. Now, this is again the AI, our risk management framework. Many of the other frameworks are a similar concept, right? The map, manage, and measure. This is just how NIST broke it down. So the key takeaways from this particular, in terms of govern aspect, is that NIST is flexible. They're flexible in terms of their approach, and they layer the EU compliant governance for the high risk of development in AI in the European region. So my point is that with the governance aspect, there are again some overlaps, which is a plus, right? Because you can take any of those particular frameworks and use them as an overlay. So mapping, and we talk about mapping, we talk about the risk classification of mapping. It's the context and recognizing the risk. So, but we also talk about the classification and the contextual aspect of mapping. Both frameworks stress identifying, classifying AI. When I say both, I mean both the NIST and the EU AI Act, right? The key takeaway here is that there's broad mapping frameworks that are components to the EU AI Act, right? And that they're tiered for classification that kind of provides a really robust roadmap for you. So if we go to the aspect of, I think it's measure, yeah, let's go to measure because we've just done map. So let's go to measure. So if we talk about measurement, we're talking about the risk assessments and the standard, right? Each framework really does emphasize the need for reliability and the metrics and the different levels of that flexibility, identifying the risk, assessing the risk, analyzing it, and tracking the risk. Again, the key takeaway here is that the alignment is there, right? One thing I do want to point out is that as it relates to the AI risk framework, and we're talking about measurement here, the EU AI Act basically states that it's a strict benchmark for them. Now, the EU AI Act is a little bit more defined and more strict, although it is a working document, right? As many of them are in the AI, in this AI digital age that we're living in here. Especially for high-risk systems, very high. We're talking about, right, healthcare, we're talking about transportation, we're talking about food. So we're talking about high-risk systems, any type of systems that are being developed where AI is being used. But it does cover accuracy and it does cover compliance. So that measurement piece is also built into the EU AI Act as well. Now we get down to manage. Right, so manage is going to basically cover risk and mitigation. That's obviously a given. Both promote a proactive risk management concept. And again, when I say both, I mean the EU AI Act and the NIST. And although I have the NIST framework core, this again is just giving you a visual idea of the concept of the frameworks, both the EU AI Act and the NIST, because those two particular frameworks are the more robust frameworks between all of them. So they both, again, are highly comprehensive, but it's going to really focus on managing the risk and mitigation. And as far as an example, I always use healthcare as an example because that affects us globally, individually, right? So if a company is developing an AI system and it's obviously to assist in diagnosing a particular disease, it's really critical for a system to ensure that it's safe and fair. The data, right, that's being used from that is accurate, right, to ensure that the diagnosis is correct. So the NIST AI framework also can help put some guidelines around that, right? So in developing the system itself, right, ensuring that it's safe, it's fair, the data is accurate, so it can decide to implement. I mean, you can decide to implement and use the NIST AI framework as that, using that as a baseline. I'm not suggesting that healthcare do that. I'm saying that this is one of many options that you have at your fingertips. You want to step, you want to govern, you want to manage, you want to measure. Right? So let's move forward. So what's the challenge here? I would say safeguarding sensitive information and data from unauthorized access is extremely important to prevent misuse and ensure only authorized individuals can view it. We as security practitioners have been practicing this for many, many decades, right, at this point, ensuring that individuals have only what access that they need to have access to a system. AI systems are no different, protecting our data privacy, right? So why, and what's the importance of data privacy, really? So I think that we all know the answer. I do believe that it impacts each of us on a personal and professional level, from medical, banking, home security, education, your children. And so if data privacy, in my opinion, is not viewed as a priority, the loss of trust in products and services are at risk, right? So thus performing a privacy internal risk evaluation could be a first step, for an organization who is looking at the data. So before you design models, you have to look at the data, right? I believe what's our challenge? So protecting the sensitive information, I believe, is our challenge, right? I believe that's our primary challenge, is protecting our intellectual property, protecting our PII, protecting our PHI, personal data, and personal health information. I think all of that ensures the trustworthiness of the data used impacts how AI systems generate accurate information. So the going says in this industry, I'm talking about AI industry, is that bad data in, bad data out. So you're going to get bad outputs if you put poor data in. So it is imperative that organizations, developers in the AI, right, developing AI models, that you're performing testing, your data mining, you're cleansing the data, basically. You're doing regular data audits, which means you're assessing the data for aging, and you're using other methodologies to really provide an overall sound, robust, I would say, monitoring of your data, right? And that's really, truly critical, because you want your outputs to be solid. So I would say that as it relates to what's the relevance, what really is the relevance? So for me, and I'm using this as simple as possible, is that it's like keeping your personal secrets safe, keeping your personal things safe in a safe box. I believe that it's ensuring the private, to ensure that the data is private, private data is ensured, and that only the accessibility to those with the proper keys, right, to that safe, those individuals who have the proper code to that safe, have clearance to help prevent the misuse and breaches, because you're minimizing who has access to that data, and it minimizes the exposure. So as far as what is the key point, it's data quality impacts data reliability decisions, and thus making high data quality essential to support. If we move on to data integration and challenges here, we really have, okay, so what is the challenge here? What does that look like? The primary aspect, the challenge is ensuring the accuracy, completeness, and reliability of data. That's what we have in terms of integration challenges. I think of a recipe that needs precise measurements, and if data ingredients are accurate or incomplete, the final product, the decision making, let's say if it's a decision making model, the final outcome is going to be flawed. So what are the key points here? The protecting the sensitive data from authorized access. That is the key point, right? It's to be essential to ensure to prevent misuse and ensure that those with permissions can actually see it. That's when you're talking about the full aspect of data integration. So I don't typically like to read slides, but you can see on the slide, it also underscores the need for stronger data governance to manage and integrate both the structured and unstructured data effectively. That is what the end goal is, right? To ensure that your governance programs are stronger. So data security and implications, what does that look like? What's the primary challenge safeguarding data here? Data security implications, safeguarding data from cyber threats. And what's the relevancy? Multiple systems and tools imply potential security risk. What's the key point? Stronger security measures are needed within AI governance to protect data integrity and prevent breaches. So I always use the example of a house, right? If you want to keep an intruder out of your house, for example, right? In this aspect, data security involves implementing the measures to protect data from hackers and criminals. You want to lock your house, you want to have the proper locks on your home, the proper security system on your home. Same concept, right? Well, similar concept. So Stanford, I did some deep dive. I've researched a lot, and Stanford recently released this report, and I'll give you resources and references at the end of the slide. But this study actually was based, even though this study was based in the US, what I want to highlight is that it's applicable to some private organizations globally. So it only provides validation from what I'm sharing with you today for the need to adopt AI governance initiatives, especially during this time, right, as we're having so many developments globally. But Stanford University had done a deep dive research and surveyed a number, I would say quite a few organizations within the US. And they basically said, yeah, despite publishing the AI principles and employing social sciences and engineering, meaning they did all the right things to conduct the research and develop technical solutions relative, many private organizations have yet to prioritize the adoption of ethical safeguards. Hence why we need you, right? We need you in this field. So the human aspect and human-centric approach is really the elements that we want to highlight here in this slide. I just want to make sure you can see it. There we go. The human-centric approach, importance of proactive and reactive approach, and the aspects of application and ethical guidelines. So I'm going to highlight just some key points here. The human-centric approach, we want, and I'm only highlighting certain points, integrating an approach that includes psychology, psychologists, linguistics, and we talked about, you saw how Stanford did their research, right? They employed the right engineers, but still integrating that approach is helpful. It does ensure that you're dealing with code ingestion issues, which is, we consider our algorithmic biases, whether implicit or explicit, as I said earlier. But you also in turn want to ensure that the behavioral and cultural analysis is beneficial to assess the developer's threshold, the organization's threshold, right? And any other experiences outside of their own. You want to have that assessment done. So the human aspect of not just monitoring the data, but monitoring the intent of why are you developing that system and what is it really for. The second aspect is being proactive versus reactive, right? So that for me means the definition involves anticipating a potential ethical, social, or technical issue before it occurs. So for example, embedding safeguards and best practices into AI systems at the very beginning. That would be a proactive approach. So the benefit of that, obviously, right? You reduce harm, misuse, and addressing issues during development and after deployment. And the aspect of the reactive approach, we all know what reactive it means, right? So you're addressing ethical issues as they arise, and you want to get ahead of that. And often the AI system has already been deployed and it's already caused the harm. So whatever that means, tool systems, whatever it could be, robotics, whatever it may be. Ethical aspects of guidelines requires incorporating the transparency and accountability. That's where we go back to explainability. And we really want to focus on what is explainability, right? And so for me, the AI ethics, the explainability, and I'm glad they have this element from the development aspect, is that from AI developers, ethics means that users should understand how decisions are made. This involves giving clear explanations when asked and ensuring results are easy to interpret. Explainability is very important. It's very key, especially as you are an organization or you as a developer. Why am I, again, developing the system? And what is it at the end? What is it being used for? And how and what helpful? So navigating the maze, where do I begin? At this point and at this stage, we are at how do I start this process? How do I navigate the maze? And I have to go back to the slide because there's a reason why I made this kind of elementary, because the concept is this is where we all are in governance, risk, and compliance. Some of us as security practitioners are in this space. I don't know where to begin. Where do I really navigate? Where do I start? And that's why I wanted to hopefully for you simplify some tips on how to do that and what your roadmap may look like, what your roadmap should include. And the first is adopt an AI governance initiative. That's going to be your first starting point. Know what your AI footprint is. What I mean by that is understand and document the scope to impact that the impact is of the systems that you're assuring accountability for. I'll repeat that. Understand and document the scope and the impact of the AI systems to ensure accountability. You want to know your AI footprint. Govern AI for use. Establish a very strong data governance practice to ensure data quality, security, and ethical sourcing. And security, you certainly want to prioritize security measures to protect AI systems and assess the data. That is a given, right? I mean, that speaks for itself. Assess and manage risk. That pretty much speaks for itself. Transparency and explainability, right? And certainly most importantly, or I wouldn't say most importantly, but you want to add this as an aspect to your roadmap, and that's to innovate responsibly. That is the key here, is to innovate as responsibly as possible. So I'm going to stop there. So if you have any questions, I'm open. This is an ebook you can check out. It talks about AI literacy, and this just my soapbox. I really am a big believer on if you're going to work in this industry, understand what AI is and understand it from the perspective as a user, as a future developer. So I'll give you a moment to take a look at that, and if not, we can always go back to that. And then this is my resource page. And I want to say thank you very much for your time this morning and this evening. And I do hope you were able to get some insights from this presentation. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to the EC Council team.
Thank you, KJ, for delivering such an informative session, and our attendees share the same sentiments. Now, if you're interested to learn more about our program, do let us know in the poll that's going to be conducted now. If you would like to learn more, please select yes and we will schedule a call to provide you with more information. An important note, admissions are presently open. For comprehensive details regarding our courses, kindly visit our official website www.accu.edu. So KJ, shall we start with the Q&A?
Absolutely, I'm ready.
Sure. So our first question to you is, how does the integration of ethical AI principle impact the overall effectiveness of cybersecurity measures?
Can you repeat that?
Sure. How does the integration of ethical AI principles impact the overall effectiveness of cybersecurity measures?
Because it's a lot to unpack in that particular question. So I'll start with the ethical aspects of it. The ethical aspects in security, our responsibility, let's go backwards. As security practitioners, I believe it's really important for us to ensure security measures, right? For us to continue to adopt our own security standards and our measures. Ethical practices in AI, I believe as security practitioners, it's our responsibility as security practitioners to ensure the ethical development, the ethical use, right? If you're working in InfoSec teams, then that would be a part of your responsibility. I don't believe that there's a separation between the two. I believe it's really critical to ensure that the ethics of development, ensuring, and I'm talking about data, right, use, transparency, and accountability. I believe all those areas are things that the security team should provide some level of oversight to. And we should actually be working cohesively to ensure that there's ethics that is being ensured as developments of AI tools are being designed within an organization. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, KJ, for answering that question. Our next question to you is, RAGs and guidelines are great, but how will they be able to effectively audit and enforce this? Due to the technology, this seems like RAGs for the sake of RAGs with no procedure or teeth. Can you please explain?
I'm not clear about the question. So I got something, I'm not clear about the question, so I want to make sure I answer it correctly.
Okay, no worries. We will take this offline. We will go for the next question.
Yeah, I'll be happy to answer offline. Yeah, I just want to make sure I
Yeah,
understand so I can help them. Yes.
no worries. So our next question to you is, how can organization ensure transparency and accountability in their AI systems to meet regulatory standards?
That is a tough question. And I would say, although I went through kind of some outlines, I would say the first initial start is identifying what we remember what we did in security. I don't know how long you may have been in security, but the aspect of providing a data inventory is really, really key to identifying that. So I believe if we're able to at least start with taking a data inventory, and I know that that is very challenging for many organizations, particularly healthcare organizations as an example, or educational organizations as an example, but at least starting there as a baseline, I've recommended to my clients that in order for us to get started with an AI governance initiatives, we have to start somewhere and addressing what data do we have in the actual organization, what data is actually necessary to be used and utilized for the design of a model or a tool that you want, to implement, right? To either streamline your processes or to increase your productivity. So I always would recommend organizations to start there. And I know it's a needle in the haystack process, but it's so critical at the end of the day that if you don't assess what data you have that you're going to use, I think if you don't use that as a starting point, it could be detrimental.
Thank you for answering that question. Our next question to you is, will AI be a challenge for cybersecurity job market? Is there any chance to develop an AI do automated security checkups?
I think we have an opportunity as security practitioners now, and I'm encouraging you as security practitioners to not get too concerned about AI taking over your jobs. I do know that there's been some shift in the United States recently where companies have shifted their budgets over to AI development and releasing employees that are in security. That may not have been it's not, in my opinion, a very wise thing to do. But I would also say, take advantage of the opportunity of learning as much as you can about AI. The AI OWASP standards is a great guideline of what practitioners should be looking at if they're in an organization or if you're applying for new jobs. So take advantage of this opportunity and start adding more knowledge to your existing security baseline, because I believe, and again, this is my opinion, that security and governance of AI developments and AI use is not going to be too much different than it has been in the past. The only difference, I think, and the caveat that we have is that AI tools, some of them obviously are being developed for decision-making models, and they're going to increase over time. The complexity of them are going to increase. But I do think that we have an opportunity as security professionals to ensure that you utilize the tools that we do have, the information, the knowledge that we do have around AI. Learn as much as you can about artificial intelligence tools, developments, the life cycle. And as a security practitioner, it'll all start to come together and you'll feel a little bit more confident as you apply for new roles or you apply for new jobs, because the job market, I believe, is going to start shifting, and they're going to need us as security practitioners to have that knowledge.
Thank you for answering that question. Our next question to you is, what tools are used to help AI in the cybersecurity world, and what are the laws and regulations against AI?
Let's start backwards. The laws and regulations around use is defined by what country you're in. It's defined by what city, what state you're in. Some states in the United States have already begun implementing what they call guidelines or ethical use guidelines, and some states have not in the US, and it's the same globally, right? With the UE for the UE for the European, right? For that area, that region of the globe, they have the EU AI Act. They have begun, to my knowledge, I believe, if I'm correct on this, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but they've already begun looking at imposing regulation, meaning their framework, they have it, but imposing actual restrictions on use. Japan is another organization that's also begun doing that. So I believe it depends on what region of the world that you live in, and the regulations and guidelines are going to change. Now, the first part of the question, if you can repeat that, I can answer that.
Sure. It's
the first part of the question was
what tools are used to help AI in the cybersecurity world?
So as far as tools are concerned, it goes back to the AI tools. If you're talking about security, there are third parties, and this is globally, that are developing AI tools to support AI security teams. So I don't have a specific list of AI tools that I would recommend. What, again, I would go back to answer it in the same concept I did before, which is that if you are a security practitioner, start with OWASP. Start with understanding what the frameworks are requiring from a security perspective. What guidelines are they giving you so that you can prepare and educate yourself as a cybersecurity practitioner of what you need to do, right? To secure your systems, to look at third-party risk, because those are things that you're doing now, but all you're doing is enhancing that level of knowledge. So I wouldn't say in particular there's an AI tool, because so many organizations are building those tools now for you, and I say us as security practitioners in the industry. But we do have these frameworks as our guidelines that we want to use, even the OECD, right? As some people would call that's a soft framework. I would even say looking at those. But the NIST AI RFM, I think, is a very strong framework for security practitioners, and I also think OWASP is also a very strong AI governance guideline as well.
Thank you, KJ, for answering that question. Our next question to you is, how can AI help to decrease full cybercrime in future?
I think that, and this again, this is my opinion, all of you, this is my opinion. I think that as security practitioners, we have an opportunity to leverage our own knowledge and fight against the threats of AI. I think that we have, and I've said this on so many of my talks and even in my writings, I believe that we have existing knowledge and tool base in our own arsenal. I believe that over 20 years that we've had practice, we failed, we've succeeded, we failed, we've succeeded. We know the landscape of the threat actors enough. We have enough knowledge at our base. And I believe that we can use AI to our benefit to help fight threats and impose threats to us, to our organizations. So I have been personally encouraging cybersecurity practitioners to really start looking at, like I said, get your hands on how do I develop a model? What tools do I look at? Or if I'm looking at third parties that have tools that are a little bit more robust in their design and their monitoring capabilities, I want to use AI to also fight, right? Because this is a global warfare that we've been in and we've been a part of for so many decades. So utilize what you already have in your arsenal, which is your knowledge base, and then add on to any AI third parties that you're talking to that are looking at that. So I think fighting AI with AI is going to be our only, our only asset. That's, again, my opinion. So
Thank you for answering that question. We'll take last two questions for the day. So our next question to you is, how to make sure that we are implementing AI governance while building AI models? For example, we need to come up with different solutions to ensure the whole pipeline doesn't have any threats. How to make sure that it is implemented?
So the question is, how do we, I missed maybe the first part of the question, maybe audio. What was the first part of the question? Please repeat.
Yeah, how to make sure that we are implementing AI governance while building AI models?
My number one go-to is that building AI models and governance has to be a part of the entire life cycle process. It should not be included at the end as an oversight, right, or monitoring. I believe that it's really important for organizations, for new organizations. Let's say if you're a startup organization, or you're thinking about, starting your own company and developing, governance should be intricately involved in the process, providing oversight, right? And part of the governance aspect is looking at all the areas that we covered in the presentation today. So I'm a big proponent on, if you're going to be doing that, follow the AI life cycle that includes ethical development. Follow that process to the letter of the law, as we call it, and follow it along the guidelines. And within that, you can include governance practitioners, some level of governing. If it's not necessarily governing practitioners, you can provide some governing over and oversight of that, so that you're looking at laws and regulations and saying this law may apply to our particular industry. So we may need to consider that this industry is going to have this type of governance. So as we're developing, we need to ensure the model provides us X in terms of outcome. So I think that that's going to be really important, and that's my biggest go-to. So I think that's a great question, and thank you for asking that.
Thank you so much, KJ, for answering that question. Our last question to you is privacy and data protection. How do organizations ensure that AI systems in cybersecurity respect user privacy, especially when collecting and analyzing large data sets?
Yeah, I think that that's going to be an ongoing challenge. It's a good question. I think it's going to be an ongoing challenge for us. Data privacy is always going to be a challenge because we have so much of it, and data is going to constantly evolve and change over time. Ensuring the privacy of it, all we can do is our best. And I think that that's what we've been doing on a global scale. We've been doing that as security practitioners, as privacy professionals. We've been doing the best that we can to ensure the protections of our data. I think the adoption of the existing methodologies that we have in place for oversight, meaning GDPR, I think those adoptions should not change. We should not waver from that. Although we have now AI governance in the fold, we still, as you saw on my slides, we still need those other aspects of governing guidelines and principles to adopt. So privacy and ensuring that security practitioners do their due diligence when it comes to data and oversight of privacy, I think is going to be a continued challenge, but it doesn't mean it's not possible. So I'm a big proponent on, again, utilizing what we already have at our fingertips. And GDPR is a great guideline on a global scale for us as a starting point of how can we ensure that we are doing that. You still have your policies, your procedures, your processes of data use, of data privacy. Those policies are not going to change. They're going to be tweaked as it relates to AI use. But I still think the oversight is not going to change dramatically. We just have to continue to do more of our due diligence as it relates to what are you using that for. You need to be transparent about why are you using that data and who has access to that data, the things that I covered in our slide today. So I hope I answered that question. I'm sorry, that was a good question. It was tough. Thank you.
Thank you again to our wonderful speaker, KJ, for answering those questions and for the great presentation and the knowledge shared with our global audiences. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we are looking for more and more sessions with you. Before we conclude the webinar, KJ, would you like to give a small message to our audience?
A small message is my big suggestion for security practitioners now is to understand what AI is. Take a look at the ebook that I shared, and I'm sure you guys are going to share the slides. So take a look at the ebook, but that's one of many. I would strongly recommend, please make sure that you do not get intimidated by this new digital age of artificial intelligence as security practitioners. Use what you already have as your knowledge base and take advantage of that knowledge and implement it, because I believe that we can be all successful as security practitioners.
Thank you, KJ, for the message to our audience.